Today we are going to be delving into the life and times of the cyborg shipwright of the Straw Hat Pirates, Franky. Franky is an incredibly outgoing cybernetic man who first made his appearance in the series during the Water 7 arc, as an antagonist actually, but despite that he was an extraordinarily talented shipwright and harbors a dream of one day crafting and sailing aboard a ship capable of circumnavigating the globe. And before we go much further, I should say that Franky is not this wonderful cyborg's name, and he was originally called Cutty Flam. Furthermore, as with all of the Straw Hats, Franky has had a bit of a rough beginning in life. He was born in South Blue as the child of two pirates who at a very young age threw him overboard into the ocean. Luckily, he was rescued by a legendary shipwright named Tom, who is most famous for designing and constructing the Aura Jackson, a vessel that was used by the Pirate King Gold D. Roger. Franky then became an apprentice of Tom, along with another boy named Iceberg. Settling in on the island of Water 7 in the Grand Line, Franky learnt an incredible amount from Tom, although this knowledge was mainly used to build small-scale battleships known as the Battle Franky series. However, during Franky's childhood, his mentor Tom was put on trial for building the Aura Jackson. However, Tom was able to strike a deal with the world government that would allow him to be pardoned if he was able to construct a revolutionary sea train. Franky was highly involved in this effort, giving 14 years of his life to assemble the Puffing Tom and its tracks. Unfortunately, this story was destined to end in tragedy though, as Spandam, the then leader of CP5, framed Tom in an attempt to gain the blueprints for the ancient weapon Pluton, which were in Tom's possession. But the truly tragic portion of this plan was that Spandam commandeered the 35 Battle Frankies and used them to attack Water 7, making it appear as if Tom and his apprentices were responsible. Tom was then put on trial and sentenced to death, leading Franky to denounce his own creations for allowing this situation to have occurred in the first place. Tom then taught Franky one final, very important lesson, which is that a shipwright must always be proud of their creations, and proceeded to announce in public that he was exceptionally proud to have built the Aura Jackson. Tom was then escorted to his execution destination of Enies Lobby on the very sea train that he had designed and constructed. In a desperate attempt to stop the train, Franky stood on the tracks and planned on using his own body to stop the Puffing Tom, which was less than successful, leaving Franky on the verge of death. After this incident, Franky was destroyed both physically and mentally, although he was able to use his knowledge to fix his body by using some spare parts, turning himself into a cyborg in the process, as well as labeling his new body the 36 Battle Franky. This new body granted Franky superhuman strength, although rather interestingly, cola was chosen to be the power source for his bionic enhancements. However, even when running low on cola, Franky still possessed an exceptional degree of strength and durability in his new form. But Franky's drive and expertise for engineering would not allow him to simply stop there, as he was also able to modify his body to breathe fire, launch his fist connected to a chain, as well as mount a wide variety of hidden projectile weapons within himself. Furthermore, he also possessed an ultimate attack of sorts, known as the Coup de Vent, in which Franky sucks in massive amounts of air with the goal of firing a compressed blast at opponents. Presumed dead, Franky would make himself known to Iceberg 4 years after Tom was taken away for execution. During this time, Iceberg had become the mayor of Water 7 and formed an alliance with the world government. The very idea that one of Tom's former pupils could do such a thing disgusted Franky, leading the two to argue. However, eventually Iceberg presented Franky with the blueprints for Pluton, believing that they would be safer with him. Franky remained in Water 7, still guilt-stricken and blaming himself for Tom's death, but now he turned to the industry of demolition and robbery, forming a rather large back alley gang that became known as the Franky family. However, despite this fall from grace, Franky's dream remained intact, and he poured all of his ill-gotten gains into a fund to buy Adam wood in order to construct his dream vessel. Now, one of the groups Franky would end up stealing from just so happened to be the Straw Hats, who had arrived on Water 7 to fix their ship. This would also result in Usopp becoming heavily injured and the Straw Hats taking revenge by destroying the Franky house, after which point Franky picked a direct fight with Luffy. So not the greatest of starts joining the crew, I must say. However, over the events of the Water 7 and Enies Lobby arcs, Franky would form an alliance with the Straw Hats in order to defeat CP9, who went on to capture both Straw Hat member Nico Robin, as well as Franky himself, in order to gain the plans for Pluton. But this essentially ended in Franky burning the plans right in front of them, and joining the Straw Hats in an incident that led to the complete destruction of the judicial island of Enies Lobby, the very island that Tom was taken to in order to be judged and executed. After this incident, Franky used the Adam wood that he had purchased with the Straw Hat's stolen money to build them a new vessel known as the Thousand Sunny. However, as a result of his actions on Enies Lobby, a bounty of 44 million berries had been issued on Franky's head, and the Franky family begged the Straw Hats to take him with them. And after a plot concocted by the two groups involving the theft of Franky's speedos, the cyborg eventually acquiesced and took on the role of shipwright for the Straw Hat Pirates, simultaneously finally forgiving himself for what had happened to Tom all those years ago. Following this, Franky's personality became noticeably more joyful and even more outgoing, if that's even possible, often reveling in his latest inventions or modifications and constantly shouting his trademark phrase, super. And purely as a result of being an awesome cyborg, Franky is exceptionally popular with the younger members of the crew, being Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper, all of whom are constantly amazed by the bizarre things that he is able to do. In contrast, the more mature members of the crew tend to simply ignore Franky's antics, particularly Nami and Robin. With that said, it needs to be noted that Franky is one of the older members of the crew, and despite his outlandish persona, he is capable of maturity worthy of his years. Those moments are just, few and far between. And so Franky traveled with the crew until they were forcibly separated by Bartholomew Kuma on Sabari Archipelago, and proceeded to find himself on Karakuri Island. No, not the disappointing one from the movie, but the real Karakuri Island, which turned out to be the birthplace of the most famous scientist in the One Piece world, Dr. Vegapunk. Upon exploring his laboratory, Franky discovered a series of old blueprints for a legion of things that Vegapunk wanted to build. Franky then proceeded to accidentally press the self-destruct button in the lab, in an event that would become known as the Nightmare of Baltimore. And having himself been caught in the explosion, all of Franky's skin was completely burnt off. However, the destruction of the laboratory led to discovering an entrance to a second lab. Franky took up residence in the lab during the 2-year time skip, using Vegapunk's research as a launching pad to build himself a new body dubbed Battle Franky 37. And by the time the Straw Hats were reunited, Franky was a completely transformed being, stronger, more durable, and now capable of firing lasers, as well as illuminating his nipples. But Franky's post-time skip functionality seems almost endless, actually. He has a body modification for seemingly every scenario, and at this point it's probably an easier question to ask ourselves exactly what Franky isn't capable of. Furthermore, he returned to the Straw Hat crew with Franky Shogun, a giant mech made of Wapo metal that can be piloted by Franky, and is even officially recognized as Battle Franky 38. And with all of these new possibilities in mind, Franky now continues his journey to achieve his dream of circumnavigating the globe on the ship that he built.